Ready? The camera's rolling? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. We're in our public session now. Let's go around the table. I'm Andy Schaefer, representing Commissioner Kelly.
Bob Sansky, State Pension Fund.
Dan Torelli, PBA.
Joe Alejandro, PBA.
Chris McGrath, PBA.
Bob Ganley, SBA.
Tom Sullivan, LBA. Kenny Squawks, DBA.
Karen Taxis, DEA.
Bob North, Actuary.
Martin Gas Controller's Office.
Seaman Ingrani, Controller's Office.
Thad McTee, Controller's Office.
Larry Schloss, Controller's Office.
Rob Goldrich, Mayor's Office.
Ranji Nagaswamy, Mayor's Office.
Janice Emery, Office of Finance. Inga Van Eysden, Law Department.
Kevin Holleran, Police Pension Fund.
Katrina McCann, Law Department.
Gary Miller, Controller's Office.
This is Mark Montefiso, Controller's Office.
And also by phone, Mike Beasley from SIS.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, let's turn it over to Larry.
Okay, we have a very short agenda today. Since we had Deutsche Bank here last week and they went through the economy and the markets pretty thoroughly, I'm going to be very, very brief and say that because we're looking at the March numbers. In March, the markets were impacted by a combination of the tsunami in Japan. The markets went down, then back up, as well as the continued increase of changes of government regimes in Northern Africa and in the Middle East. Having said all that, they went down and back up. So, in an odd way, point to point, really nothing happened. But there was a lot of anxiety in the middle. Markets moved around. So again, skipping the economic slides, if you quickly then go to page 25. This is the global stock markets. And again, we're going to go through the March numbers, and you can see that the markets were down anywhere from 5 to 11% in March, and they bounced right back up. In fact, if you look at the red, which is emerging markets, it's higher than it was at the beginning of March to now. So all was pretty well back in shape and up. What that transpired into for us on page 27.
Are you talking in the booklet or in the other presentation?
Oh, I'm talking the slide presentation.
They don't match on the book.
Oh, sorry.
So it's page 33.
So, yeah, 33. So 33 in the book.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
All good? 27? All right, so this is the police pension fund assets since 03. New high again, end of March.
Remarkable number.
Remarkable. In fact, if you look at the bottom line of the text, we're up almost 23% since June. Just spectacular.
Larry, would you say that's a result of accident or design?
My appearance.
That wasn't one of the choices.
I know. It wasn't right in
Nice try, though. I like that.
No, it's a result of the asset allocation and all the markets going up because the Fed has just kept rates so low, and they're encouraging risk-taking, and we're just set up perfectly for it.
So all the trustees deserve a round of applause for this one because it was a very good
Excellent. Right?
result.
Yes, it is.
There you go.
There you go. So if you look on the next page, 28 in the handout, again, nothing but up since the fiscal year, which was, if you look at the June 2010, all was good. Now, you may recall last year, June was a down month. We were up like 22%, and then all of a sudden we gave probably 5 or 6 points back in June, so it ain't over till it's over. But so far, everything points to the right direction. Page 29 is our asset mix. If you look over in the the right-hand numbers, we're all sort of under-allocated fixed income, which is the right place to be, and over-allocate a little bit into U.S. equities and emerging market equities. We're sort of under-allocate a little bit in EFA because of some of the volatility that's going on internationally. skipping over to page 31, again, for all the turmoil that went on in March, if you look at the far left-hand column, we made 1%. So it shows the benefits of diversification. The biggest non-usual contributor was emerging market equities, which actually had gone down a little bit before the tsunami and then came up pretty fast. U.S. equities performed well. EFA wasn't so well. And private equity, which is lagging, the marks are sort of coming up. So it was a good contributor as well last month. You can see again we're up 22% fiscal year to date, and the 3 years is almost 4%, which includes a decline in 08. So we're sort of back on track. If you look on page 32, you can see again the 1 month numbers, pretty much even keel despite the big volatility that went on intra-month. If you rolled it forward from March to the end of April, we probably made another 1% in April. Again, because the markets were probably up 2 to 3%, and we're diversified. So I think net we'll find that we're up probably another 1% in April. I asked the team if we had any specific manager comments to go through as we roll through this, and the answer was quickly no, because next month we're going to have the quarterly report, so we're going to do a deep dive in managers and who contributed and who didn't, unless anyone has any questions on any particular manager. But pretty much we came out of March great for all the volatility, and we're doing great for the full year. So to be honest, I have nothing else to talk about in the monthly results unless you want to talk about it, since we have a shorter meeting. Okay? That gets us to the emerging manager review, which I'm going to hand it over to Seema to walk us through.
Did you pass over? We're just sending you around the color copies. Okay. So, you could turn to slide 2. This is just a little bit of background on the Emerging Managers Program. The intent here to invest in smaller investment managers that they don't really have enough assets as standalone mandates for us to invest in. And so the way police has been investing in emerging managers is through what we've called emerging managers of managers, which are fund of funds, essentially. And they're the ones that will invest in these smaller managers, pull together a portfolio, and monitor those on a regular basis, monitor performance, monitor risk management in the portfolios, and they've been providing investment expertise to us over a number of years as the program had begun. Generally, these sub-managers, as we call them, so these are the underlying managers within the fund of funds portfolio, we call them emerging managers until they reach about $1 billion in firm-wide assets under management. That's the way the program was set up, and that's the way that it is currently. If you look at slide 3, just some history. So back in November 2007, police invested about $150 million with 5 of these emerging managers, fund of funds. At that time, this represented about 5% of your total U.S. equity active assets and almost 1% of total assets. And you can see listed here below are the 5 fund of funds, the 5 emerging managers, the amounts that we had allocated to each. And you can see there in the footnote that Vivian Capital, which you had invested $25 million, was terminated last year. If you turn to the next slide, slide 4, this shows you current market value. So this is as of March 31st of this year, how the money is split amongst these 4 now emerging managers. So the total is $130 million roughly the same amount as we had back in 2007 in terms of percent of active U.S. equity and percent of total assets. If you look at the next slide, 5, that shows you the performance. So as you can see here, I'll point you to a few columns. If you look at on the 2010 line and you scroll across, and then you look at the column far toward the right, which is SI, that's since inception, excess return, which again was 2007. Your managers have outperformed the Russell 3000 index, which is the benchmark, by 133 basis points. And as of 3/31/2011, they've actually outperformed by 187 basis points, and this is all net of fees. So these emerging managers have performed quite well for police. And so as we think about the program going forward, if you turn to slide 6, a couple things. So they performed well since inception. We terminated Bivium, which is one of the emerging managers, and that was about $23 million at time of termination. You also might remember that we terminated one of the developing managers, Lombardia, last year as well, which we now are out of as of March of this year in terms of transitioning those assets. And that totaled about $50 million or so. So roughly $75 million has come out of this overall program. And so as we think about going forward, we'd like to do an RFP. We've talked about that before. And so we think we probably get about 15 to 20 type managers out there. Last time we got about 12. So we're looking to expand the opportunity for these emerging managers, many of which are women and minority-owned businesses. And also, we thought about dollar amounts. So $75 million came out, and so we were thinking, I don't know, maybe we could consider recommending $100 to $200 million of investment on behalf of police. As you might remember, right now, your emerging managers' investments is about 5% of your total U.S. active equity assets. If you look across some of the other systems, it's much higher than that, so there's some room there to consider. And the other thing that we were thinking about is there are other asset classes that one of the other systems has invested in this emerging manager program. So not just in U.S. equities, but also in EFA and in fixed income. And so that's another possible opportunity for police as we think about issuing this RFP and see who we get. Because we think there are some other potential managers out there that could provide some investment management expertise in some of these other asset classes. So that's another thing to consider. As far as a policy, so again on page 6, we thought a lot about this and we spent some time talking to the existing emerging managers and managers that we have in the portfolio. And we also talked to SIS. We talked to Barry. And I know Mike Beasley's on the phone from SIS, and he can chime in on this as well. But this point number 1, this bullet point, as you know, I mentioned earlier that right now we classify an emerging manager as someone that will have assets under management of $1 billion or less. In talking to a number of our firms and talking to SIS, we really think that moving this amount up to $2 billion makes a lot of sense. Because already with a lot of market appreciation that we've seen, a lot of our managers are actually over this $1 billion mark, and in essence, we'd have to essentially push them out of the program because they've hit this, limit that we put on it early on at $1 billion. So we would recommend that we move that up to $2 billion. And in fact, Addix, which is one of your emerging managers, their program is built around classifying an emerging manager as a $2 billion max firm-wide assets under management. So already they're doing that. And SIS, I don't know if they may have some commentary, but they've agreed with that sense as well. So that would be one recommendation. And the only way that an emerging manager, once they reach this $2 billion firm-wide asset under management maximum, the only way they would be able to graduate is if we would issue an RFP. That would be the only way that would happen. So
yeah, for a specific role.
Correct. That's right. And then they would have to be selected by the board. So that would be the only way. Otherwise, they will remain in the emerging manager program. We would not kick them out necessarily. And then the last point here is that currently we have a few sub-managers, so these underlying managers within the fund of funds portfolio, who are also one of our developing managers, and so we would not want to have overlap there. Once they're able to move on and be standalone, we'd keep them standalone, and then we'd ask our fund of funds managers to go out and find some new managers to put into that portfolio.
Now, the emerging managers and the developing managers, they're in the same bucket.
It's an overall program.
So you'll graduate from emerging manager to developing manager, but you're still within the same bucket that we have for this program. So as they graduate, you know, there's still that money that they're using, or maybe a little more of that money, but it's still out of the emerging manager program.
That's right. So right now we're classifying a developing manager as someone from $1 billion to $5 billion. And then once they're beyond that, then they're
All grown up.
over. Yeah, exactly. So
As that program grows, you know, we're going to be aware of crowding out. You know, we have the developing managers taking more. Obviously, they're becoming larger. We still have to have the spaces we originally designed for the emerging managers.
right.
Okay?
That's right.
You got to keep aware of that. They'll gobble up the little guys.
Right. That's right. So, so that's really the recommendation. It's more about the policy. It's about issuing the RFP, and then really just seeing who comes in and who we get, and then we'll come back to you with analysis and recommendations.
So are you looking for a vote on anything specific today?
To the extent that we'd like a motion from the board for approval to issue an RFP as SEMA outlined, yes.
So the RFP is actually mostly intended to replace Vivium and maybe add some dollars to that mandate? Is that how to think about it?
Doesn't part of the motion have to update the policy to?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
To include the fixed income and...
No. To go to $2
Oh,
billion.
$2 billion, okay.
Yeah.
So, Seema, we had sent a lot of questions about the policy issues. We don't feel like, unless you have those thoughts back for us now.
Well, there's just those couple things that I mentioned. So we had conversations with all of our emerging managers and managers on this topic. We had conversations with Barry at SIS. And in one example with Addicts, already 6 out of our list of managers, so almost half, are already at this billion-plus mark. And again, we'd have to go back to them and say, pull these guys out and go find other managers. And we've got that sense back from a couple of the other emerging managers. So for us right now, we'd have to make a decision to push out a lot of these managers just on a subjective limit that seems to be too low.
So we're very confused, though, because we have a developing managers program as well. So do we need these various categories because we run into this and we want here, the perversity to me is that when somebody succeeds as an emerging manager, they start to grow because of some policy reason we kick them out of one program. Our question is, why don't we readdress policy to be sure that we define emerging and developing the right way so that when people succeed the way we want them to, we don't have to do these things.
Well, the difference is, under the emerging manager program, you pay another layer of fees. Right? You pay the fund of funds fees. So if someone's doing good, you'd like to not pay the fee, move them out, have them stand on their own, and keep the capital there, and then tell the fund of funds manager, and then go find someone else. That worked great.
So then keeping the billion makes sense because we would then take them into our developing managers. We don't have to fire the manager. We can
Right.
just move them out of the fund of funds program. This is why we asked for clarification about what the emerging versus the developing managers programs are.
The only thing is, though, is that the only way we could pull out an emerging manager is if we're going to issue an RFP for another product for them to then apply as a developing manager. So,
But our question was, why can't we write the policy so that it allows us to do that without writing an RFP? We would rather be thoughtful about the policy than force sort of, guide. I mean, because someone's going to always push up against $1 billion, but there's a difference between our emerging
Well,
and
I
our
mean,
developing.
I tell you that right now. I'm not pushing up against the
Yeah, we wish we had that problem. For the managers, assets under management. So we would like BAM to review policy rather than be in a position where we have to kick out managers from one program into, or change the guidelines for a program. We apparently have 2 programs.
Right, I guess the issue, though, would be we don't have contracts with each of the underlying managers signed. We have contracts signed with the fund of funds manager, and so the only way, I think, to move them out is to do an RFP. I don't know legally how we do that.
I'd love our legal minds to go to work.
I think you raise a very good point, and I'd have to see the contracts, and maybe I'll discuss this with Valerie Budsick. I don't know if it's something we can do now, like I don't know if you can alter what the governing contracts to have, but it might be something
Right.
worth considering for the next contract, that the manager doesn't move out or isn't kicked out, but is allowed to stay for the duration, even if they move into the developing manager category.
To be fair to the idea of the program and what we're looking to do, then why don't we just take this as advisement for the next meeting where we'll have these issues fleshed out, and also just maybe have also a proposed resolution, what we're looking for. I know we discussed that, but also with the language of the policy so that we can review it against the policy and how it would change. I think that would be the best way to approach it. But definitely, I heard the point. I think it's a valid point, but it's a question of how we actually get there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Any of these managers that presently are funds of funds that obviously has done well for us, I mean, are there any in jeopardy of being kicked out and not being funded by us? I
Yes.
mean, that's my concern, because they,
Yes.
I mean, is there a time
it
frame
would
on
be
that?
like now, because they're already over $1 billion.
but if we can stay that until because we're trying to address
Right.
within the parameters of the system. So why don't we just till next month till we have it all fleshed out?
Mhm.
And I don't think it's going to be that long because you got some good legal minds. You put them together and. Only today, only for this moment. Wait for the next meeting. I'm not letting the pigeons loose here, take it easy. However, in order to get all the parameters, so that we're all a little better educated on it in that sense, along with the language, and that would be, I think, the best way to approach it for next month. And, then we could address it then. I'm pretty sure it won't be that hard of a move.
I would also appreciate more sort of specifics about within each program, which are the managers that are bumping up and how have they done, et cetera. Just to, on the policy issue in terms of the change. The other comment is, I actually have trouble from page 5 telling whether this program is succeeding or not, because I don't know our expectations are for emerging managers. What does the policy statement say about what we expect from these people? We hope that staff would go much more into things like information ratios to understand what managers are getting, what kind of risk they're taking and what we're getting paid for.
Right.
So just looking at excess returns just doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me whether the size is helping versus our larger managers, who we expect these guys to beat over time per the investment policy statement. So if we can flesh out performance reviews a lot more than one page, that would actually be very helpful.
Sure, and we actually have all that information, so we can do that.
Great. Just as a matter of all routine, in terms of any, I know you do, so it would be great to just put it in to what the board sees.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I might, Seema, on the summary on page 5, you mentioned the overall objective of the program is the Russell 3000 index. But I notice on page 44, because 2 of the manager of managers have small caps, and 2 of them have all caps,
That's right.
you measure them against the appropriate indices. And I'm just wondering how, for the program overall, the Russell 3000 remains the appropriate benchmark if the characteristics are different, and whether you've already adjusted for it.
Right. So, I mean, we thought about that. So the program, when it was started, the benchmark chosen was the Russell 3000. And you're correct that we have some Russell 2000 managers in there. So when you look at the individual manager of managers, the performance in the tracking area, this goes to Runji's point, look at the overall program, and the numbers are higher, much higher, because relative to the Russell 3, a Russell 2000 manager is going to have higher tracking area. And the performance will be better too, relative to the Russell 3000. So I know Mark Gross had spent some time talking to folks internally, and I think to some of the trustees about should we try to do a blended benchmark to capture more specifically how these managers are doing. I think the bank had some issues with trying to figure out how to blend the benchmark. But it's definitely something that we should address when we do the new RFP, and we should think through this again because that's just the way it was set up, and I agree with you that we probably need to get something that's more specific to our manager.
Yeah, I can see here that the individual managers are being graded against appropriate benchmarks, but the program has grown. The characteristics of the managers have changed a little bit, and then it does bring into question what is just an ideal benchmark. Not that there is any such thing, but you're already addressing it, so. It's just the one observation I had because the numbers between your page 5 and the presentation, they match, well, 3 months apart.
Right.
But they're laid out a little differently and just somehow has to be reconciled.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just ask too, on Bob's point, if the policy says that we expect these managers to significantly outperform larger managers,
right.
why are we using just a simple Russell 3000 as the benchmark? Why aren't we using Russell 3000 plus some additional return?
Well, I do think we should address the benchmark for sure in this next RFP. The other thing is, I'm not sure where the word significantly came from because what we've asked of these folks is to outperform by 100 basis points net of fees. I don't know if that's significantly. It's okay.
Because
it's
that's actually
good.
not in the policy. So
Yeah.
maybe we need to, as we're looking at the policy change, just clarify that as well.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't want to push them I wouldn't want to push small managers to try to exceed benchmarks. Otherwise, they're going to take on all sorts of unintended risk. I think if you can develop managers that exceed, that either at or a little bit above, I think we're doing a good job. I think they're doing a good enough job also.
Then if that's the case, why don't we just use the cheaper managers? I mean, why are we taking
Yeah.
on this excess
Point
fee
of
if we're
active
not?
is to be
Well,
competitive.
it's net. Don't forget.
Yeah, but then we may as well end that.
So if the fund to funds manager is helping us to create and affiliate with new up and coming managers and they're beating the benchmark after their fee, the underlying manager is beating the benchmark without the fee. So you're getting the performance. And after the fee, you're better off. So I think that's a reasonable place to be. If we want the fund to funds manager to have to aim high net of his extra fee, you're going to get a little more racehorse in who he picks. And I'm not quite sure that's really what we want.
This is an actively managed part of our portfolio. This is getting our active risk budget. If we don't get paid or we get paid in our other active mandates, we've got to talk about what we're doing here. So I think the goal is that we want to help these managers, but our fiduciary obligation is to make sure that after fees, they're generating returns. They're taking active risk.
Just
if you're not
remember,
getting paid,
you added an extra layer of fees, and you can't
Well,
expect the active manager, the underlying active manager, to have to be better than that, his fee plus that fee. I think that's unreasonable.
Larry, this is my problem with fund of funds.
Well, again,
And once
this
we
program
get
is
it-
designed to come up with new managers.
But if the fund of fund managers cannot find, fund of funds guys cannot find managers who can give us 100 basis points net of all fees, they're actually not doing their jobs.
I know, but that's 200 gross then.
That's the
We
benchmark,
should,
that's
we
the
should have,
target.
we should have a whole portfolio of 200 gross. Would
Well, we
be-
have the same conversation for hedge funds. I mean, it's the same conversation regardless of what the underlying mandate is, which is a fund of funds fee layer has to be justified by the fund of funds manager to justify their existence. Otherwise, we should literally be indexed or doing it ourselves. And we
Well,
can't do all this ourselves, so we
That's
should be
it.
indexed.
Right, we can't develop a pipeline of new small managers, by ourselves.
Right.
Right, so you have to pay someone to do that.
Well,
I think there are other issues that when this program was created to look at was that we were looking for an opportunity to develop people who normally would never get the chance to show themselves or show their capability. And I think they were trying to be reasonable in whatever benchmark they ultimately chose to do this. But I think the issue is that some people out there can outperform, can do the job, but they didn't have the right, let's really look at it. They didn't come from the right feeder schools and go to the right firms and didn't get the right backing. Well, the idea is that there are people who will be able to do the job as good or better. And I think that was the idea of doing this emerging manager program and developing probably the next group of financial performers who will ultimately assist the local economy, in a sense, in doing what they're supposed to be doing.
I completely agree, Joe. I think the purpose of
So I'm
finding
worried
new
about
managers.
the conversation we're having about how much we're looking in terms of the benchmark, and then if they're not performing to that benchmark, why are we really in this program? Maybe we should go to some sort of other type of program. And I'm a little concerned about that because I do believe in this program. I do believe that there are people who, because of certain opportunities, may not have the ability to show themselves.
So-
I think this program, I do believe in. And in the end, people want to argue about $151 million. Okay, then we could argue about how much we're actually investing and why. But I think in the end, we'll probably get more out of this program than we've actually invested in.
So I don't think we're going there at all. So any interpretation that, let me correct that. We are completely supportive of the program, but these managers won't succeed if they don't add value over the benchmarks. Our goal is for them to succeed and go on to becoming large managers, to find skill. I don't think any of the fund-of-fund managers is going to sit here and say they can't find managers who add 100 basis points after all fees. I don't think they're going to say that. I think they're going to say they can. And these funds will only graduate from our programs and become successful if they show they can add value after fees. So I think this is completely aligned with what we're trying to do and trying to keep the heat on our fund of funds managers to make sure they're deploying our capital in the right types of firms to create those kinds of economic incentives for people who don't get to show their stuff otherwise. I don't think.
But to be
misaligned,
fair to
Joe?
Larry's point, and I do understand it, and again, without having a whole discussion of 08 and the implosion we had in the market and how much we actually were rewarding extra risk taking, I do have a concern that Larry makes a valid point. We start pushing on the actual return with extra, how much extra it will give us the return that we like, to kind of pay us back for the risk that we're taking. But at the same time, how much risk are we actually looking to have these managers put into the portfolio? And ultimately, do we want that program to implode because someone did take too much risk?
Well, I have no idea what the risk is. That's
Well,
why
that's what I'm saying. So
asking you to see it.
that's a broader policy
I think
discussion.
we're sort of, we're all talking around, sort of agreeing,
Right.
oddly. I think that the program has worked, right? You have to have an intermediate layer of fees, right? That is the fund of funds manager's job. The underlying managers have to, by themselves, exceed the benchmark, otherwise they're providing no alpha, so what's the point of the whole thing? So we're really arguing about the delta between what is significantly above the benchmark, and is it after the fund of fund manager's extra fees, or is it before? How should we look at it? I'd say let's wait until we see some numbers, but overall this has worked net of all fees, so that's a good thing. And I'm sure if you peeled this back, since we're up 187 basis points to the benchmark net of an extra layer of fees, you're north of 200 on the underlying managers. That's spectacular performance.
Yep.
So, I think
What
the
was that,
program.
Mike?
Yeah, agreed.
You're like the voice of God up there. I don't know.
It's the wizard.
So I think the program's doing well. We'll come back. We'll refine the terms a little bit. I think clearly we don't want to push people out unnecessarily. A, which is why the expanded cap makes sense, and B, we do have this issue about. I wouldn't say going around the RFP process, but you wouldn't want to push them out so they get fired. That's the wrong outcome.
Correct.
Right? So we'll have to figure out with Corporation Counsel how to make sure that doesn't happen. So we'll come back next month with the whole thing wrapped up. But again, having terminated Bivium and having terminated Lombardia, we had promised all the boards that we'd come back with an RFP for emerging managers to bulk it back up. So we wanted to sort of get on with that. Okay? So that's the end of that discussion. unless anyone has any questions. So that ends the agenda for the public session, unless anyone has any questions on anything else. Good.
Motion to leave public session, into executive session. Second?
Second by SBA.
They will-